I remember when my first life coach said to me, "How did it make you feel?" And she just had to give me a whole sheet with all the emotions on it and start to try and identify. Literally had to learn how to link those emotions to the way I was speaking about myself, because the only other way I was doing it was through my songwriting.
Welcome to the Burnout Detox Kit Podcast. I'm your host, Sophie Theen. I'm an award-winning people and culture executive, keynote speaker, coach, and the founder of the Burnout Detox Project. For more than a decade, I help companies build high-performing teams and cultures across fast-growing businesses. But behind the scenes, I was burning out over and over again. So I saw the side of success nobody talks about openly. So each week, I bring you raw conversations, expert insights that will help you navigate your toxic workplace and finally understand what success should never demand from you. So if you press play today, it means some part of you is ready for that to change. Welcome, and let's get into today's episode. Welcome, Debi. It's such a joy to have you here today.
Thank you so much.
Well, I've been really looking forward to this conversation today because your story embodies the raw, the real, the regenerative side of recovery for burnout people. And I know it's also something that I would deeply resonate with because the concepts that you are going to teach us today. So are you ready for this?
We are. Let's go.
Great. So just to kick off, I know one of the most common things that I hear in burnout stories, including myself, is the disconnect between the body and our awareness of what's happening. Most of the time, we sit in this limbo stage, not really realizing what is going on with us, including our body. And I remember just drawing back from my experience, I had this moment where I wasn't sleeping, but I was telling myself that I'm just too busy, too much work to get through. I would take the rest when the time comes until my body kind of like just gave out. And then I listened.
Yeah.
You had a very similar story too. You shared something that really stayed with me.
Yeah, it was really interesting because you only notice things that are out of the ordinary. So one of the things was being in the car, setting off to go somewhere, ending up the other side of town thinking, how did I get here? And then the extra levels of exhaustion. So I had the 2 young children. I had the husband that was working every hour under the sun, trying to study law and work full time, and also had struggled with depression. And I was trying to be this vibrant teacher and meet all the needs of my students. But I would come in exhausted. I'd give everything to my job and come in. And I remember flopping on the sofa and my little 6-year-old going upstairs, getting a blanket and putting it over me. And as that blanket hit my body, I was like, my goodness, I am like the worst parent there. Why should my 6-year-old be caring for me right now? That's not their job. And it was a bit of a wake-up call for me. So yeah, it's those moments in our lives, aren't they, that are just indicators that we're off center.
I mean, it's painful to listen to that story again, and I know you've spoken about this. For me, when you reminded me of that story, it feels like the pressure to be on. You're meant to be really switched on all the time, especially as a parent as well, is relentless. I hear so often from mothers that they feel like they're not performing enough because they don't have enough joy or energy, and they constantly feel like they're failing, but because the system around them is failing them.
Yeah, I was reflecting on that too, as far as how much we carry as a woman. Yes, we are designed and we have this incredible ability to carry a human inside of our bodies for a season. But then if you think about it, that's a gradual process. The baby grows slowly. Our bodies adapt to that. And yes, we carry it for a while, but then we're no longer carrying that baby. We're not designed to carry babies 24/7. We're not designed to be, like, say, switched on 24/7. And there's also that whole performance anxiety that I was feeling for a number of reasons, stemming back all the way to childhood, that I had to have therapy for and work through. But yeah, we absolutely put so much pressure on ourselves, and it's not sustainable.
I can only imagine. Of course, it's not sustainable, right? Because it feels like taking a rest and taking care of yourself is not something that is ordinary.
No.
So I know all of that experience, including that wake up call that you had with your baby girl, brought you to a journey where you teach us and other people that play is not sustainable when our nervous system is dysregulated.
Yeah.
And that for me feels really revolutionary. Can you walk us through the concept of what you're creating here?
Yeah. So in my quest to be the best human I could be and meet the needs of the children I was serving as a teacher, I came across a lot of young people who were struggling with their mental health and landed in a job where I was working in the community, and I was put in a mentorship role as an unqualified therapist. And they were giving me children who had had extreme abuse, who had extreme illnesses, who had extreme family situations that I just wasn't qualified for. And that sense of overwhelm drove me to thinking, right, I need to qualify in therapeutically here because they deserve someone who's safe and able to hold these situations. And I think anybody working with young people needs to be accountable. So on my journey to becoming a therapist, I came across things like the polyvagal theory, the effect of trauma, attachment, and applied it to my own life and realized how anxious I was as a person, even before I was a mother. I found music. I was a musician all my life, and I went on to teach music and use music in my therapy, etc., etc. So those were two strategies I kind of held on to, but I didn't know about how my body works, how the nervous system responds to stress, how we can become ill from stress. I also was diagnosed with adrenal fatigue. I had low magnesium levels, low iron levels, and insomnia. So, I'm really passionate about not just surviving, but thriving and living in an optimum way. Because we were talking, weren't we, about being in business and living optimally. And one of the indicators of someone who's performing in an optimum state is that they can think outside the box, that they can think creatively, right? And that is something I want. I want for me, I want for the people around me. I heard about attunement and I had never heard of that before. Attunement is literally like the old radios tuning in to the child in front of you because their energy may be quite low. They might be playing with something and you don't want to actually come in and say, let's play this. So if a child is, say, playing with some Lego, this play therapeutic approach would be to come alongside and be curious, but it's actually letting them lead the way. And when you let the child lead the way, that is the opposite to what I was doing as a teacher. I felt like I had to have all the answers. I felt as a parent, I had to plan out the environment around my child so that they felt like they could do this and do that. We can apply that to many areas of our lives. And this whole pausing to tune into where am I at?
I think I understand what you're saying here is basically you're using that strategy to shift yourself from, that feeling of guilt and not participating and not being present to finally feeling this grounded awareness so that you can actually be present in the moment and then bring joy back. And I can almost hear it from your tone already that you're so excited to actually share this with the world because if I were to, come back into my reflection, I used to think that resilience actually just meant pushing through, pushing hard, and then you hope that you never break, right? And on top of that, you also want to ensure that you never let anything slow you down because it's all about going up and never coming back down, right? It's completely unsustainable, just like what we were saying earlier. I mean, hearing myself say it out loud right now just sounds so ridiculous. But back in the days, I actually definitely believed that was the only way forward. The only way forward is up.
And there's a phrase I say to many of my clients, which is permission to play your way. Permission to play your way doesn't just mean playful activities, but it means you can let go of all the things that you're comparing yourself to, all the other people in your sphere. Let yourself find a flow that works for you. Because if you go too fast, you burn out. If you go too slow, you fall asleep. Yes, bounce back ability. We have to have some energy to bounce back with. We have to have the tools to notice when we're feeling a bit depleted. It's finding that rhythm, isn't it?
Exactly. Real resilience is actually the capacity to even notice it earlier, to soften, to give yourself comfort, and to also then after that stay present with the discomfort, because otherwise how would you grow from this?
Yes, absolutely. And I think being the oldest of 6 children and the way I was brought up, I think there was a very strong sense of right and wrong. And I heard this wonderful quote by Eckhart Tolle saying, "Would you rather be right or at peace?" And that like hit me so hard because there are so many times you feel like, but that's not right. I need to correct, or, but that doesn't feel right. And it feels so uncomfortable to sit with something that's like, but then actually sometimes we need to let the child discover things for themselves. That sense of autonomy is so key when we look at child development. And it is so hard, especially when you're a natural teacher or a natural leader, to step back and allow that child to discover, or allow your client or somebody under you that's in a business sense to discover for themselves without rescuing and pulling them out all the time or taking over or taking control. It's a beautiful thing to just be okay with just stepping back and giving space for what unfolds.
Yeah, and let's just make it clear, we're not saying that everybody is a child in this context. What you're
No.
really saying is obviously being present again and bring back our raw emotions. Because I think something really powerful you said here is that, for example, when that happened to me, when burnout happened to me, I didn't even have the language to actually describe my emotions, right? I wasn't in tune. I wasn't in touch with my own emotions. And that really was the most difficult thing I had to process, because in general, so much of burnout is actually unspoken, right? The emotion sits with our body and we don't even recognize it, like we said earlier, until it actually starts to overwhelm us. Debbie, how did you begin reconnecting with your emotional language, and what can we learn from this?
Yeah, absolutely. We're not saying that everyone's a child. We do have to be kind to ourselves, though, as we would a child. And I have to just be gentle with myself in the way I talk. That self-talk is a massive factor, isn't it?
How did you, from your experience, how did you begin reconnecting with your emotional language? And why do you think this is such an important thing for us to learn?
It is essential for people, I think, in my generation, especially because we didn't have emotion coaching. It wasn't mainstream when I was growing up. And I had loving parents and they did as much as they could to show me that love. But one of the factors being in a larger family, 6 children instead of maybe 2, well, then you get a third of the possible time you could have one-to-one with them. And I remember when my first life coach said to me, "How did it make you feel?" My response was, "Well, this happened and that happened and this happened." And she'd have to pause and say, "No, how did you feel?" And I went silent and thought, and she just had to give me a whole sheet with all the emotions on it. And I had to go down and start to try and identify. I think it's disappointment. I'm actually quite frightened about this happening, or I feel overwhelmed right now. And literally had to learn in my teens how to link those emotions to the way I was speaking about myself, because the only other way I was doing it was through my songwriting. So yeah, it was a real learning journey for me.
And is it different from the way that, say, for example, is it different, or how vital it is to healing ourselves from burnout, especially for women and parents in this context?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not possible to be reflective if you don't stop and pause. And I do think many people really do benefit from having that third party, having that other person to be that mirror and reflect back what they're hearing, what they're noticing, your body language. If you look at sort of polyvagal theory and we look at the nervous system and how it presents, our facial expressions, our voice, our mannerisms. Where are my shoulders at? Are they up here and slightly tense right now? Or are they relaxed? Am I grinding my teeth at night? Am I breathing through my nose or am I breathing through my mouth all the time? This is just these signs that can really give us a broader picture and help us to really become more conscious of where we're at.
Incredible. And coming into more of your coaching methodologies here, Debbie. So as a leadership coach myself, I often work with very high performing people or highly driven people, ambitious, who technically don't like to slow down or being told to slow down because it's not natural for them until they're forced to. The next time I hear from my client or the very same person that I can almost see them coming very close to the brink of burnout, the next time I hear back from them is when they've collapsed. Now they want to go onto a healing journey. So I must say that I was really intrigued and curious to hear that you've spoken to large corporates, big places like, the likes of KPMG and so forth about play healing, right? What are you seeing specifically in these environments when they are introduced to this concept?
Well, I think just giving people a really simple framework. So the framework is pause, play, connect. We're all built for connection. Play builds connection in all its forms, but we must pause and attune so that we can play and connect. And just having a really simple theory like that for them to go away and apply really helps. And so they're already coming into this with this mindset of, I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done. And I've got to be the best parent in half an hour. So they have got the most incredible intentions. I've never come across someone who doesn't love their kid and wants to be the best parent they can be. But it's just pausing and slowing down and think, okay, when you do bath time, how about you pause? And while you're doing bath, instead of saying, I've got to wash their hair, let's make that into something that's playful. Water is therapeutic. This could be a really lovely time of relaxation and connection. So let's just dive into that. Let's find ways of you tuning into your body and how you're going to prepare yourself before you walk in the door. Just these little tweaks make such a difference. And for them to give themselves permission to look at things from a different perspective and try to put more of a play-fueled lens on what they're already doing makes a real difference sometimes. And there's so much family breakdown going on at the moment. That's another thing. And lots of divorce. I've just been through a divorce. It was amicable, but it was still stressful. Mm-hmm. And it had a massive impact on my teenage girls. It's recognizing that and getting support, getting people to come alongside you who've gone through that and say, I've been through that, I've walked through it, and I've come out the other side, and there is hope. I think spreading a message of hope and just makes the difference I want to bring to people's lives.
I can only imagine that. That's quite, like you said, you're trying to make it really simple and digestible for people to understand that actually we're going back to basics. If we can't find the feeling of play, which I imagine can only equate to the feeling of joy, to the small things that you have in your life, including, if you can't solve the small problems, how can you then imagine yourself solving or tackling bigger problems, right? Which is often what is really expected out of our careers in workplaces, from your managers and all of these things that's going on. So I must ask this question. For someone who is really in the thick of it right now, and I know from my own experience that when you are struggling in the burnout cycle, everything becomes extra complex. It's not as easy to just understand something as simple as what you're saying, scaling back and getting back tuned to ourselves. So what is your one message to people? Or, I have spoken to people who call them micro boundaries, tiny shifts that matters. Yeah. What would be your advice for someone who's currently in the thick of it?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about how pausing is powerful and that connection is key. We're all built for connection. But if you're in a place where you can't even face connecting with anyone right now, it's absolutely about those small, tiny steps. Everyone knows maybe exercise is good for them, but it might be just getting up off the sofa and walking to the kettle, making that cup of tea, coming back again, and that's enough. And that's, I know there are people out there who that is a real struggle right now, even right in the middle of burnout, or it's walking out and sitting in the garden with a cup of tea, coming back. It's these small things. And we can't, it's not always easy to have these healthy communities around us, but it's reaching out to like-minded individuals, but reaching out to professionals, not being afraid to ask for help. The self space is a wonderful organization based in London. There's lots of sort of drop-in therapy centers with professional qualified therapists, and you can also do it online. And I know there's other things that you can, other therapeutic ways that you can get help, but it's really, really important to find people that are non-judgmental, that will meet you where you're at, and is okay if you're feeling like helpless and in that kind of child mode. That's okay. It's empathy, having that empathetic response to ourselves, being kind to ourselves, because that's where the journey of adventure begins, and that's where restoration begins. It's just those drops of hope go a long way if we set ourselves just in that little direction. That one degree in your ship is going to end up in a very different place. So sending love to everybody out there who's struggling right now.
And any small shifts they can do to help them reconnect with themselves if they're feeling quite lost right now.
I think nasal breathing is very important. Having your hand on your heart and breathing through your nose and counting whether beats work for you. It might be 4 beats, it might be 6 beats, even if it's just 4 in, 4 out. We don't hold our breath. We just let the breath go in and out gradually. And then if we want to bring ourselves more into a ventral vagal state, we would be having longer exhales to tell our body, sort of trick our body into thinking you are safe right now. You don't have to prepare to fight or flight or freeze or fawn. So yeah, there's lots and lots of different strategies. Sometimes people find movement. I know one of my brothers found 5 rhythms, really, really helpful. So movement as meditation, because I personally find it very hard to sit still and meditate, but I meditate through movement, and I'll just move my body and focus on my breathing. And that brings me a lot of peace, as yoga would, or other things. So yeah, it's permission to play your way, being open to lots of different things and finding that thing that resonates with you, that brings you peace. Yeah, it really is.
Essentially, you're saying that we need to be kinder to ourselves and take care of ourselves again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually simple is powerful. And we should never look down on the simple things that we were built to do as humans. So enjoy resting and pausing, and then flying again when you're ready.
Amazing, amazing. That's so on theme for our show here. So lastly, where can people find your work or just follow you and understand more about what you're teaching?
Well, I'm always open for connecting on LinkedIn. I have a lovely following on LinkedIn, and maybe just say you've heard me on the podcast, because I'm a bit picky with who I connect with sometimes. And playhealing.com has all the links there. I like Instagram and stuff, but playhealing.com, and everything's on there. But yeah, sending love, and thank you so much for having me on your show, Sophie.
Amazing. Well, Debi, thank you. I want to say thank you once again, not just for your wisdom today, but also for your honesty. There's such softness that comes from you, and obviously, most importantly, your permission. You've reminded us that recovery is not a one-time event, and it's a relationship with your nervous system. It's going back to basics. It's learning how to understand our emotions, and your pause, play, connect model, I'm sure, is a very compassionate way for us to understand how to help ourselves. Not everything is about performing. Not everything is about achieving. Not everything is about being the best version of yourself if you don't learn how to pause, play, and connect. Amazing, amazing. Like I said, I cannot wait for this episode to go out to people. And thank you so much for taking your time today. If this episode resonated with you today, make sure to follow and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a conversation as important as this. The Burnout Detox Kit is here to make sure ambitious people like you recover from the burnout without losing themselves in the process. So if you know someone navigating burnout right now, workplace toxicity, even simply trying to hold it all together, share this episode with them. You never know who might need to hear it. I thank you for your courage today, and thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next episode.